Hoops through life. Hoops through life.
Welcome to another episode of Hoops Through Life, a podcast where we discuss everything related to women's basketball player development, the collegiate recruiting process, and transition from high school to college. I'm your host, Elspeth Bierman. Our guest today is Coach Sidney Parsons. Sidney played for 4 years at the University of Bridgeport before spending 6 years playing professionally in Germany and another 4 seasons in Australia. She brings a wealth of experience coaching professionally and working with clubs across Germany and Australia, and has presented at international seminars and clinics. She was an assistant coach for the German women's national team at the 2024 Paris Olympics and has now taken on an exciting new role as a full-time coach with the German national program. Sidney serves as the head coach for the under-20 team, an assistant coach for the senior national team, and works closely on player development with high potential athletes. Sid, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks, Els. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so let's just start with your years playing professionally overseas. How did you find a team, and what was that transition from the States like?
Yeah, I mean, it's been a journey for sure. Obviously, we played together at the University of Bridgeport. And I'd say my last couple of years, I knew I wanted to try to go overseas. So while I was playing my junior year, an agent ended up reaching out to me who represents mainly in Germany. She reached out to me, asked me if I'd be interested. I told her I would be. And then she started finding me a couple teams, couple offers. They were all over the place. A team in Spain, one in Belgium, and then a few in Germany. And I ended up writing her back and just saying, yeah, I'd love to. I'd be most interested in Germany. My family's from there. And then everything kind of came together. We found out that I could apply for a German passport. And that was a huge, unique way for me with my foot in the door to kind of get overseas and specifically back into Germany. So I decided to go overseas and give it a go. And back then, for me, it was go over there, experience 1, maximum 2 seasons and enjoy it, and then go back and get into law school. I had a full ride scholarship to law school back then. So I kind of just wanted to go over there and experience it and get back. And now I'm here 15 years later, still in Europe.
Is that full ride still on the table for law school?
I don't think so. I think they asked me, I revoked it my first year or put it on hold, and then they allowed me to do it. And then my second year, I had to revoke it. And yeah, it was a tough decision for me to make for sure between law school in LA or staying over in Europe and grinding through the process. But yeah, it's been a journey. So go ahead.
No, when you say you found a way to get your German passport and that was a good way for you to get in the door, what do you mean by that?
Just when you get a contract overseas, they either go with an import status or a European status. So different countries have different rules. Back then, Germany had the rule 3 imports, and then you're allowed to have 2 European imports, and then you were allowed to have as many Germans as you wanted. So I counted as a German. So I went from me having 2 offers all of a sudden to 10. And I counted as a German player when I got there right away. But the team I went to took that very seriously, made me have German lessons, only let me speak in German, and yeah, they put me full into it.
Yeah. So, okay. What was that like? Because to that point, had you had much, because I know at Bridgeport, we had a lot of teammates from a lot of different countries. And so maybe you picked up on some stuff, but how was that different?
Yeah. I mean, I grew up learning Spanish, unfortunately. When I was young, before school, my mom would teach me a little bit of German. So with my older brother, she spent the most time speaking German with him. With me, I was kind of the middle. And my younger brother, not much at all. But yeah, when I went to the school system in Arizona, it was mostly Spanish. And also at UB, I did Spanish as well for 3 years. So we had a couple German teammates over in UB. That was nice. I was always speaking German a little bit to them, but my German was poor. Grammar was very bad. I was mixing it with Spanish all the time. So yeah, when I got overseas, they just told me, they're like, you're German, you're gonna learn German. So yeah, it was good. I had lessons twice a week. And I had some awesome teammates, they only spoke German to me, helped me, and then I helped them with their English. So it was a fun process for me.
Yeah, that's cool. And so you said that when your junior year, an agent had reached out. Is that typically how that process works? Is somebody might reach out at a certain time frame? What can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, it's interesting now. I mean, times have definitely changed in terms of everything being so much more accessible online. So I think there's a bigger pool. It's easier to get in contact with agents. Back then, I think it just happened to be by chance. The agent who reached out to me was representing a few of our athletes who are at UB,
Mm.
who did the swap, basically came over for college as European students. Yeah, and so I know she had a couple athletes over on our team, and she was watching the games and. Yeah, I think that either our coach had reached out to her and said I was interested, but she ended up sending me an email and just asked if I would be interested. And yeah, it kind of took off from there. Nowadays, I think it's a little bit different. I think just agents are able to contact a little bit easier, but also there's just such a pool of athletes who are interested in coming overseas now. So I think the communication is not due to luck, but there's a much clearer process now.
So let's say that I was an athlete in college and I wanted to play overseas internationally, but nobody is contacting me. What is the process for me to maybe get in touch with an agent or, kind of get through that pipeline?
Yeah, I mean, usually through the coaches is the way to go. I think just because now it's funny, I'm working backwards, so I'm working with a lot of collegiate programs where I'm emailing them about athletes we have over there in whatever program and just letting them know, hey, our European championships are going to be at this date. Our camps start here. We would like the athlete to be released for this. So almost every single collegiate program that I speak to know about the European championships are very supportive about the athletes playing there. And then that's usually how we kind of build the connection. So we're communicating a lot with collegiate coaches. They're communicating with us. They kind of know the pool that they're trying to get athletes over and vice versa. So I think usually for an athlete to tell the coach that they're interested or an assistant coach, they usually have the connection over to Europe, either to a pro team who might be looking or then to an agency who they're usually kind of feeding in and out with some athletes over.
What are some things that American athletes who have no experience understanding international basketball, maybe what are some misconceptions that they might have about playing in Europe or playing overseas?
Yeah, a lot. I think I think the number one thing I get, so obviously, I mean, I didn't fully answer your first question, but I came over here in Europe and I played professionally for 6 seasons. And then after my sixth season, or during actually my fifth and sixth season, I also played in Australia. So I would do a European season and then finish and then go and play in Australia, and then come back and forth. After my 2 years of doing that, I decided just to stay in Australia and play over there. So I kind of have a mixture of European experience, Australian experience. And the number one thing now that I've become a professional coach or that I was a professional coach, when I had athletes come, and the number one thing, especially rookies, was always salary. That was always the biggest thing for them that was like very realistic. So EuroLeague, Euro Cup, these countries that are paying very big salaries, that's not every country. So I think the salary is a huge misconception. A lot of collegiate athletes throw a number out there when I'm talking to an agent, and it's just like, no chance. There's no chance they're going to get paid that in these other leagues at the very beginning. So I think that's one big thing. And it's going to be interesting. I talk with a lot of coaches about it now, like NIL deals, everything that's popping up now, how much it's changing. The salaries in Europe, I mean, there are some countries that pay extremely well. There are leagues that pay extremely well. Obviously, you work your way to get there. But there are a lot of leagues and a lot where the rookies end up going that don't have these flashy salaries to start off with. So I think that's the number one thing that people have to get used to when they come over here. And just, I would say, I wouldn't say conditions as a negative thing, but when you're coming from a university program, especially like a mid-major or a high D1 school, you have a little bit of everything, right? Like you have food, you have your community classes, you have everything that you need. Your gym is there, and your practice gym is huge with a wood floor. You have your weight room right there. You have 5 coaches, and you get used to that. You have your gear, you're flying to your games, and then you come to Europe, you're playing for a good club, but you're busing everywhere. So you're going to ride 8 hours to the bus, get out, play. If you're lucky, overnight it. If you're unlucky, ride the bus back. Meals all of a sudden aren't provided, or if they are, then it's a low budget meal. Yeah, training scenarios are very different from club to club. Some are lucky, but you're not always going to have the situation where you have your training arena, you have a weight room, and you're generally talking about one head coach, and if you're lucky, a full-time assistant coach and a full-time strength coach, but that is not in every single program. So I think it's kind of a wake-up call when you leave a university and come overseas. There's a ton of positives on this side over here, but it takes some adjusting when everyone comes over first.
So real quick, back to the salary point. What would you like, maybe if you could talk a little bit more about expectations versus reality in terms of like clubs, like what is the range, I guess,
Yeah,
between different clubs and salaries? Obviously, knowing that nothing you say is set in stone, right? Because things
yeah,
are so different everywhere else.
yeah.
But yeah, could you just speak a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, it's what I think you don't take into consideration as well with the first offer, is that usually your apartment is paid for, your car is paid for, all of your bills are paid for. So that's kind of hard to grasp the concept. So when you look at this original offer and you're like, wait, oh my goodness, I had a job offer in the States and it was so much more money. And then when you kind of think about everything comparatively, cost of living out here, but then when everything is taken care of, I think it ends up balancing out very well. But yeah, I mean, it's all over the place. There are some countries who are going to be paying an import, I mean, anywhere from like 1,500 euros a month. And then you can obviously go, Turkey, Russia, these higher leagues that are going to be paying a significant amount more. But it's all over the place. I mean, these countries are all having different budgets, different salaries, and how they want to build it up. But yeah, that's the number one thing I think is, and then in the end, sometimes you kind of look at it and you're like, oh, is that going to be enough? When you look at it for how much the club does provide, it ends up balancing out. But I think it's just very different too in the US when you're getting this sum of money, in a job offer.
Hmm.
So yeah, it definitely takes some people some taking time to.
Yeah. How would you recommend an athlete and their family to get knowledge about this process? Is it finding an agent that knows what they're doing and vetting an agent, or is it trying to acquire knowledge on your own? What would you recommend?
Agent,
Yeah.
finding the right agent, 1,000% finding the right agent. I had a few agents leading up. One of my closest friends, both the wife and the husband, they're both two of my closest friends. They represent me. I've been working with them for years now. And yeah, it's just you find the right fit, you find the right people who represent you, who are extremely yeah, knowledgeable with the situation overseas or compared to the States or in, all these other countries that have leagues as well. So it would definitely be going through an agent.
Hmm. What are maybe a couple quick questions that you can ask as you're trying to vet an agent to make sure that they're properly equipped with the knowledge and kind of have the athlete's best interest at heart?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things too is when you're looking at an agency website. For me, I mean, I guess I'll look at a different perspective. Now as a coach, when I was going back and going through my recruiting process, usually an agency website that would have 7 pages and have so many athletes, at the end of the day, you would kind of think, well, do they really know this athlete? Do they really know their strengths? Do they really know their weaknesses? Are they really going to know if this player is the absolute right fit for my program? So kind of spinning that around, if I were the athlete, that would be the biggest thing for me is to make sure like, okay, this is a very well-known agent. This is an agent who obviously represents great athletes. But are you talking about, am I one of 500 or am I one of maybe 60, and that's a big number. So 30, 40.
Yeah.
I think that's for me one of the biggest things is the connection with the agent. You can't ask the question up front, but I think if you're able to kind of look at the agency website and see how they are, and then also get a feel for them in terms of like what's the representation like. So some agencies are now working as partners, so they have that, and that's a good thing. So that means you have more coverage. But I think just kind of getting a feeler out first. Sorry, I'm thinking in German while I'm speaking English. So if my words get like
That's
super
okay.
mixed up, I'm literally thinking in German and trying to get the words out in English. Um,
Your
but yeah,
teammates did a
so
great job teaching you.
oh, I know, right? Thank goodness. But yeah, so I think it would just be making sure that how the representation is going to be with that agent. So is it going to be somebody who's representing a lot or somebody who just has a better base but works closely with the athletes? Another thing I would ask too is what countries they end up working with most. So usually agents specialize in an area. You can obviously see from the agency website, okay, this player maybe is playing in the W, this one's playing in Australia, this one's playing broadly in Europe. So you can kind of get a mixture of that. what areas they're trying to represent. Coming over as an import and getting into the Spanish league right away is a very tough thing to do.
Hmm.
So you want to make sure that, it's an agency that's kind of broad based and maybe has an open eye for these other leagues that will be a really good league for you to go into, have an amazing first rookie season, and then kind of springboard from there. And then just asking a bunch of questions that are geared for you individually, right? Like people want to come overseas for different reasons. Some want to come over for the salary, some want to come for the experience, some want to come to grow. Some want to come over here and live the experience in terms of, I want to play basketball, but I'd also love to coach. And that was always something that was interesting to me, was making sure I had an offer, or that I had a good situation. And then I also had something that was going to keep me occupied other than just basketball. So yeah, I mean, that's like 10 different things I've named.
Yeah.
But for me, it's more about the person. And then what do I want out of it than just generally what kind of things am I looking for through an agency.
Hmm. So I just real quick, just going back, what about your playing experience overseas? What was maybe something that surprised you?
Oh gosh, where do I start? Oh man, my first year, I have to say, like, I don't know why I was at a camp today, and one of the athletes went to a big college back in the States, and we were just talking about things I don't remember. But when I came over my first year, I think it was a shell shock for me coming from an American university program and being so busy, and always having something to do, and just being so absorbed in that life, and then going overseas. And I still had an amazing team that year. Like I had great teammates that I'm still in touch with today. Um, but you go to practice, you come home, and then you have to wait for 5 or 6 or 7 hours until your next practice. So we were practicing at 9 a.m. on our skills practice or our weightlifting practice. And then you go home, and then your next practice is either at 6 or 7 or 8 p.m. sometimes. And that's a huge gap to fill when you don't have to go to class. So that was kind of like, okay, what do we do now? I think that was the biggest thing to get used to, is how do you occupy that time? How do you stay busy but productive? Or, are you gonna do your master's? Do you want to grow in some other area? I think that's the number one area that people tend to get lost when they come over here, is that they have these gaps in between the day. And you can see a lot of them are just coming and, then it's Netflix or having a nap, and which you need. I mean, you're a professional athlete, and it's very, very draining. But I think if you can find a healthy way to maintain that gap and continue to grow in between everything, I think that's the biggest thing you have to get used to, is it's got to come from yourself rather than from your college schedule.
Yeah, I think that's the most common misconception about athletes in general, is that they have great time management. I think that's not necessarily true. I think
Yeah.
athletes and people in general are good at following a schedule. If
Yep.
you, like you said, in college, if I know that I have 6 a.m. lift, and then 8 a.m. class, and then 12 p.m. class, and then I have to eat lunch, and then I have lift at 3, and then another class, and then practice at 6. I have great time management because I am just going from thing to thing to thing to
One to the
thing.
other.
But
Exactly.
when you give me all of that free time, what am I going to do with it? It can be really hard for a lot of people to just kind of manage their own time. And it's like, oh,
Yeah.
we're not all hanging out at the caf for 3 hours, and we're just like living our lives as adults.
Exactly. Exactly. And then you add in the language barrier. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I was lucky, I decided to stay in Germany. I had other options to go into another country, but I really wanted to keep learning German. I had an option with the German national team a couple years down the road, and that was just kind of what I was gearing towards, was seeing how far I could get in the German league. But I have so many friends who've gone and played in so many countries. Some are playing in Eastern European countries where it's like nobody speaks English. And so that's a hard time for them to fill that gap, because even when they go anywhere, it's hard to you have so many great people around and kind people, and people are usually almost always trying to help in some way, shape, or form. But I think for you, at some stage it gets lonely, and it gets exhausting always asking for help. I have had several players or teammates play in Asia, and that's another experience in itself. So I've been lucky to play in countries where I either speak the language or it's an English speaking language, like in Australia.
Mm-hmm.
So communication was easy for me, but I know for a lot of my players that I ended up coaching when I was coaching pro for the 6 seasons, that was the biggest hurdle I had to keep trying to push them over. So like, hey, go ahead and get German lessons. And even when they got it, it was just so hard for them to try to, maintain that motivation to learn the language and then get out there and try to speak. So yeah, that's a huge one that I would say is a big factor to think in when you're going about other countries.
Yeah, that's a good point too, because you could play 3 seasons in 3 different countries, and now probably every language is just blending together, and
Yeah,
it's just like probably very hard to understand. But
absolutely.
so can you walk us through the transition from playing to coaching? What was that like, and how did you make that jump?
Yeah. I mean, it's funny. Of course, when I was at UB and I was always talking about my next career, was always geared towards law school and going that direction. My dad told me one time when we were on a hike, he's like, I think you just need to be a coach. Like, I think you'd be a great coach. And I was like, no, no way. I'm never doing that job. Like, no, that's not me. And it was me. I mean, even when I was in high school, I was helping my former coaches with kids camps, and I loved it. Always had a knack for it. And then when I came overseas my first year, that was part of the big thing for me was always trying to find a way, even to learn the language, but also to kind of immerse myself in the culture. That was a huge thing for me. So every team I played on, I asked to coach a team, a youth team. So I started off under 10s, then I went up to under 14s, and then I think it was my third or fourth season. I just happened to be in a really cool city that I was playing for. And there's a really high youth team we have here. It's called the WNBL. And they told me that I had to coach that team. And I was like, what the heck? I just want to do this for fun. This was like a really serious team. And it had like a huge time commitment where I was like, oh my gosh, I have 0 days off. Like I play on a Saturday, I have to coach on a Sunday. I have to drive 4 hours to my youth game. Like it was heavy, but that's how I met my mentor. And he really just like kept pushing me and kept supporting me. He made me get my license while I was still playing. And that was something I didn't want to do. I didn't want to do it in German, but he kept pushing me to get it done, which I'm so grateful for. And yeah, on that team, I had a couple athletes who are now huge German national team stars. So the ones we're seeing pop up in the W, the ones who are playing here, EuroLeague, and just absolutely destroying it, played against them or coached against them, or I had two of them on my team. So it was really exciting just kind of getting into coaching and getting a little bit more serious with it back then. Yeah, and then anyway, I went over to Australia. I was playing over there. And at the beginning, I wanted to start just doing some camps. Had a couple offers to do some clinics. I loved it. And basketball in Australia is so big. Everybody wants to play. Everybody wants to come to camp. Everybody wants to practice. So it was awesome. I coached a couple camps. Parents approached me, asked if I would do some indies, like individual sessions. I was like, sure, why not? That process grew over 4 years. I went from my first two kids. In the end, I had over 55 clients who I had, that I was training through our club. And then I was working clinics, and then I was working for basketball schools in Queensland as well. So Queensland would hire me, then I would go over and coach a basketball session at a certain school. And then all of a sudden it progressed to Indigenous populations, and it progressed to special needs. So kind of almost touched on every single area when I was over there, which I loved. And I had a couple of teams I was coaching too at a school there. Yeah, so I did that for 4 years. I was really enjoying it. I was still playing. And then I got a really, really bad knee injury, actually, when I was coaching,
Oh
rebounding a
no.
ball. Yeah, and thought it would just be a quick cleanup. And I had already signed for the next season, and it turns out it was just a knee surgery I was not going to be able to recover from. So I was just, well, I was thinking about what to do. Like, can I stay out there? Can I kick off my coaching business? Because I was still associated with my club at the time. And then my agent called me and she said, look, we have an opportunity here. We know it's going to take a while with your knee, but this Euro Cup team in Germany wants to sign you. They'll be patient with you. They'd like you to play Euro Cup. If you get healthy and if you get there, they're willing to take the risk, but they would like you to coach the second league team as a head, and then also be an assistant. If you can't play, you can be assistant for the Euro Cup team instead. I was like, perfect. This is like dream come true. So yeah, I signed the contract, packed all my stuff up from Australia, which was very hard to do. Moved back home for a while, tried to like figure out how I was going to get, into my assistant coaching role if I was going to do that instead of playing. And yeah, all of a sudden I was just preparing all this stuff as an assistant coach. The head coach called me, told me my project was Leonie Fiebig, one of the WNBA champions from New York now. She was just one of our youth players back then. And so I was just doing all the research on her and figuring out how I'm going to train her individually. I was really excited for the job. And then I got a phone call 3 days later from my agent, and she said, "Hey, the head coach has resigned." And I was like, "Crap, I'm out of a job." And she was like, "They voted and they want you to be the head coach." And I was like, "No, hands down, no, absolutely not." Like, I've coached, but I have never coached a pro team. Zero experience. And these were all German national team athletes who were on this team. Like, this was a former Euro Cup team. They had the best athletes there. I was like, there's no way. Long story short, there was a ton of financial problems. So that's why the head coach had quit. The budget absolutely collapsed. I got on a phone call with the management. They said, "Look, you have no pressure. We just want you to stay in the league. So just finish at least 10th place. Then you've done your job. We'd love to give you the job." And then the captain, Svenja Punkos, now gold medalist for 3-on-3. She called me. She was my captain, and she just said, "I support you. I'll have your back through this process. Let's give it a go." And I was like, "Okay, let's do it." Yeah. So I went from all of that to all of a sudden being the head coach of TSV Wasserburg, who at the time was a really big German club, and we had 1/5 of the budget we thought we would have. So yeah, I had to learn within 1 month maybe how to recruit, how to budget manage, how to plan my practices, how to get everything together. And yeah, I went over there, and I had an awesome assistant coach who supported me as long as she could. She was also coaching another program, so she had to leave right before the end of the season. Taught me how to clip film, everything, and I was just like, okay, let's give it a go. We had an amazing season. We were third place. We won a medal. An unforgettable season, and just kind of took off from there. I think after my first game coaching for Wasserburg, we were expected to finish as one of the bottom place teams just because we had no money. And we played the former champions at their place in front of the entire league. We did back then this thing called season opening, so all the teams played against each other. And of course, my team was playing against the former champions, so I was like, "Oh my goodness, this is gonna be great." But we sat down, like, we prepared for 2 weeks for this game, and just like really intensive scouting, and just had our game plan locked in. And we went in there, and yeah, I played my Germans, I played my pros, and God, they played their heart out. We won by 30, I think, in front of the entire league. And yeah, after the game, I get a phone call, and it's from the head coach of the national team, and he said, "Hey, like the way that you coached, and was really impressed, and would love to have you with the German national team if you'd be interested."
So you have so much experience working from, you said under 10s all the way to professional athletes. What, if you think about progression of skills, what for you, like if we start with a novice, what are maybe some key skills and concepts that you think are more so the foundation to focus on to like prepare them for higher levels of basketball
Yeah.
development?
I mean, it depends. So if I'm looking at this from a youth perspective, then for me, it's all about like skill development in the sense of what do we want to build these athletes into? And right now, athletes that I am working with the German national team, I mean, I'm working with the senior athletes, and I'm also working with our high potential athletes. And that can go all the way down. Right now, we're on 14 years old with those ones who we have already identified. And so when I'm getting them, biggest thing like I'm trying to make sure is what position are they gearing towards, but not locking them into one specific position. That's really important for me. And then just an all around fundamental base. So we want finishing a different type of finishing school, making sure that they can finish with their left and with their right. I'm huge in ball handling. I think if you let me, I could do ball handling for half an hour every single day with all the athletes, and it's great. I love it. And then again, like I said, finishing around the rim is going to be huge. But then out of different scenarios that we want to try to put them through, and then they have to be able to develop a stable shot from the ground up. I think it's tough when you're getting an athlete later on who hasn't really built the shot up. So we spend a lot of time making sure that we're working on them with their shooting skills already if they've been identified at that age. The number one thing I have to say right now, and this is predominantly with the stuff I'm dealing with here, because in Australia, it was a little bit different. In the States, I think it's also a little bit different. The schooling system's different here. So there's not the same impact of an athletic program. And so that's the biggest thing I would say that I'm working with athletes on here at the moment, is making sure that they have a sound athletic foundation. So preventative, like making sure that we're working on them with all of their all of their cars, and just making sure that we're doing prehab in the first line, and then building it up to mobility, agility, coordination, and then into strength. That's the biggest problem we're trying to see, but also that we're trying to prevent long-term injuries with them. So I tie that in with my skills training.
Yeah, and also I would say in my experience in the States is that those components that you just spoke of are kind of dealt with in silos, right? So
Yeah.
you might go to a speed or agility coach, and then you might go to a skills, and then you might and nobody's really communicating with one another, and nobody's really talking about how it's, functional to the game or whatever it is. A lot of people have those issues. I mean, I see it. I work a lot with youth girls, and coordination, I think, is a huge thing that I see of that's an issue. So what types of things do you do during your skills trainings to build up, let's say we're starting with the coordination piece to build up to strength?
Mhm. Yeah. So, I mean, because of the program I work with specifically right now, like we have our own system in place. Like we have our own prevention cards. We have our own strength program that we're working with. We have our own agility program we're working with. So we incorporate that within the sessions. When I was coaching for a club, for example, and I was getting a younger age group or even my pro age group, and maybe I had a young talented German player on my team and I had a skill session with them, then I would just try to build stuff in with it too. So a lot of ball handling too, you can do so much coordination with it. So I'm trying to do a little bit of hand-eye coordination with that, or incorporating maybe a ladder agility with a ball. So we're doing ball handling through the ladder agility while we're also working on our footwork, changing our pace. So I'm usually always I can't, I'm going to use this word and I'm going to regret it, so I'm not going to say it.
Okay.
I'm just trying to incorporate always like a brief set of agilities or a brief set of coordination. And then as soon as I can, I'm trying to incorporate it so that's basketball specific. So whether that's incorporating the ball or whether that's getting you to come into a movement so that you're moving into your shot, moving into your finish, something like that. And I do find too, like as quick as I can, once I've got that skill base established and sound, or we've worked on it for a little bit, we're always trying to get into some type of differential learning activity within the workout. So we always want to try to progress into a one-on-one, or I'm trying to put in a constraint on the type of drill. So maybe I don't have a body there for a defender, but I'm putting a constraint that's mimicking a live defender, mimicking a stress situation. So they have to think. So I'm almost trying to layer kind of everything on top of each other as much as I can. So we'll start with the basic agility skill or coordination, whatever I'm working on, plus the skill, and then we're combining it together. So maybe they have to move a certain way to get into it, and then they're trying to read the next situation out of it as well. So I like to try to progress as quickly as I can once they've kind of got the skill that we're looking for into the next thing, and pull it all together rather than this drill, this drill, this drill. I find it just gets so disjointed, or it gets so boring for the athletes at some time. And then if I'm moving on with a senior athlete, then I'm usually incorporating it with some type of play action that we have. So whether, we're playing a certain ball screen, or we're playing a certain indirect action, or we like this type of offensive concept, I'll try to add that into whichever concept we're working on. So they're thinking a little bit more dynamically than just the drill.
Yeah, what would be an example of a mental stressor that you would add on?
To the drill, yeah, adding
Yeah.
anything. It depends. Like you can take it something with shooting. So, you can do a time stressor with that. A certain amount of makes where they have to go for. There's a lot of times when we know a player is struggling with their shot. So we're gonna do a shooting exercise. And I mean, this is very, very basic, but say we're ending with free throws. And I know that, where you're short, you're not using your legs. So you cannot get out of the drill until you've made 5 swishes, and swish counts when it hits the back of the rim. So now all of a sudden they're not just trying to swish, because you're going to notice they're going to brick it quite a few times. And then if I'm telling them, like, after the first 3 times, if you hit the back of the rim, though, it counts as a swish. And all of a sudden they're consistently hitting the back of the rim and it's coming through. I mean, you've put that stress onto them that it doesn't count unless it's a swish. But then you're kind of helping them a little bit more. I want them at the end of the day to shoot higher. So that's why I'm having them aim for the back of the rim. So you're almost incorporating the stress with a learning situation like that. You can add also, like, misses are minus, makes are plus. So they're always competing a little bit like that. I have them compete against the clock. So they're doing a shooting exercise against the clock. Or again, if we're playing then a type of differential drill. So let's say we're playing some type of advantage, disadvantage one-on-one. then we're doing that through maybe placing the defense somewhere that's advantageous for them, or putting the offense in a advantage situation instead. Defense is behind, so now I'm working on finishing when she's behind you. I'm working on finishing when she's on your side. I'm working on finishing when she's right in front of you. So I can kind of adjust the defender for what I want them to try to find a way to read out of the drill.
So, and obviously I'm thinking more so for the States, but answer this however you want. How can youth programs and coaches kind of, like adapt that approach or use that approach as a model to maximize their time with their athletes?
I think it depends. Like it depends on what the structure is of the week. So how many times do they get training together? If you're talking about, classic over here is sometimes our youth coaches only see their teams twice a week. And then I'm coming in and I'm talking to this youth coach and I'm like, hey, you need to work on her athletic foundation. You need to work on her ball handling. You need to work on finishing under the basket. And I'm giving him 6 things and he's like, what the heck? Like how do I tie this all in? But that's the theory. I really just, even when I was coaching the pro team, that I just really try to build in is how can we get bang for the buck, but without getting ourselves lost and losing our focus on the things that matter. So the fundamentals, are they in a correct defensive position, all that type of stuff. So I think the more that they can either find a way to incorporate a warm up with some type of coordination, with some type of agility exercise, then okay, you've got your warm up done and you've incorporated the stuff that you want to get going for mobility, stability, agility, whatever you're going for, and that, which is what we try to do. And then when you're getting to the drills, okay, if you want to work on some skills, like rather than always doing the same layup drill, how can we make it something different? How can we make it a little bit more dynamic? So how can we incorporate a certain skill finish that's going to be incorporated with one of our concepts instead? So you're combining two different things there. Or again, if you're doing a certain type of, I don't like to use the word drill, but if you're using a drill, what is our main focal point? But how can we also incorporate one more focus for the offense to make sure we're covering as much ground as we can? So I think it's goal setting. You have to sit before the week. Then you have to sit a month in advance, and then you have to sit at the beginning of season. What are our goals? What do we want to achieve as a team? What do we want our athletes to achieve? And what do we want to do as coaches by the end? So then you kind of have to gauge your goals and figure out what you want to achieve and set your priorities as you progress through season there too. So in German, we have a big thing I'm thinking translates to English as periodization. So I think if you do it with periodization as well, obviously with a pro program, I'm working with a off season, a preseason, an in season, which we call competition phase. So a high competition phase, lower competition phase, and then we're ramping back up to our highest performance phase, which is going to be the playoffs. So even as we're going through those different levels of the season, that's when we're also trying to change, okay, what is our function that we're trying to work with the body? What type of skills are we incorporating? And then what is our conceptual focus coming in?
I thought that
So,
was
in
a
a
great,
long about
no,
way.
no, that was, I think that was a great breakdown. And it also goes to, you have to know one, which you're looking for. So you have to have that foresight, like you said, the goals. And then two, you also have to understand your players and what skills or what, situations you need to put them in to get them working on what they need to work on so that they can be successful in the game. Because that's what it's all about, is translating all of those skills to an actual game environment.
Yeah, and I'm all about self-education, right? Like there are so many tools for coaches to educate themselves actually without having to go to a course, which if you have the time for, even better. But there's the FIBA website. There's the WIBC website, which is also associated with FIBA. FIBA Europe has an amazing platform where you can go on the website, you can watch different drills, you can watch clinics. They also have an interactive coaching system where you can, look at drills, look at plays, write your own playbook. There's so many tools to learn from, but no matter what, whether if you're watching a video, whether if you're watching a course presented, or whether if you're at a clinic and you see something you like, or watch basketball, right? EuroLeague, Euro Cup, collegiate basketball. Ooh, I like what they did there. Okay, how can I make that apply to my team? So I watch the Australian NBL a lot, and then I watch EuroLeague, Euro Cup women, and obviously the WNBA, and then any national team event, which is who we're usually playing against. And when I'm watching any one of those games, especially with the men in the NBL, I love it. I love their structures. And so I'll think, okay, I like that trigger. How can I make that fit my team? And then I'm going to try to incorporate that. But then how can I get that skill breakdown within my practice within the next week and see if it fits my team? So I think the number one thing, like you said too, is you need to know what your plan is that season and your goals are and what you want to achieve with your athletes. And then I actually think it's really, you kind of have to work backwards and then figure out how you can make each drill or each exercise apply to what you want to achieve.
Yeah, it takes a lot of work up front, but then that's kind of your roadmap or your playbook as you go through. And then you just, like you said, oh, how does that work? Maybe we need to make an adjustment here. Maybe we should try it this way, or just scrap that completely. That was awful. It's not anything like what I thought it was going to be. And
Yeah,
just,
often.
yeah, but just keep playing and tinkering and see what the athletes like, what they respond to. So,
Mhm.
yeah, cool. All right,
Yeah.
I have last couple questions
Mhm.
that I ask all the guests. So, what book or podcast would you recommend every young athlete, or I'll say coach too, athlete or coach read, and why?
Yeah, I love Coach K's stuff, all of his books, and I read it as a coach. I recommend it to coaches just because there's so many lessons in them. One of my favorite ones that he published is Beyond Basketball, but I had about three Coach K books that I was always keeping around here, and I've had so many athletes on the pro level who have different journeys, and there's like so many chapters that I think where I'm like this is exactly the chapter I just read. So there's so many times that I'll just hand the book to my player and just say, hey, read chapter 5. Let's come back and let's talk again tomorrow. Or just giving them a book and letting them find out on their own. So I had such a great relationship with one of my players here. And she played for me for 3 seasons and just a great person all around. And yeah, in the beginning, everyone was like, oh my God, she's a hard one to crack. And I was like, I think she has potential though. And anyway, she's just incredible player, incredible person. I ended up giving her the book one time without even telling her. I was like, look, this book helped me. I think if you have some time, try to read it in between practices and see if you take anything from it. And she would come to me like before a game, before a practice, and then just be like, yeah, this is exactly like the book. Like this is exactly what's happening. I'm like, I told you. It's like, that wheel, when you talked about the wheel and that piece was missing and then the wheel was gonna fall apart, but everyone came together. And she's like, that's what we can do right now. And it was like, taking a lot of those lessons that he wrote in there and applying it to herself, applying it to our team, to our season. So yeah, I love that type of stuff. I would always
Yeah,
recommend Coach K. Beyond Basketball is one of my favorites.
awesome. And then if you could make one rule that all basketball coaches and trainers had to follow, what would it be and why? And don't think about consequences or logistics. It's just you're the ruler of basketball. What rule would you implement?
It's tough, right? Um, I feel like the number one rule, you have to know your why. You don't have to know it. Like you don't have to, I'm figuring it out. I'm jumping from being a player to all of a sudden coaching a pro team and now working with a national team and your way is always going to change. But I know today I jumped from a morning individual session with high level pro athletes, and then helping out at a youth camp and then coming back and then doing another performance development session, then doing an athletic session, and you jump from every one. And there are some times where I'm like, oh my gosh, why am I doing this? Like, well, why am I working these long days? And I'm finishing up with some scout tonight. But I know my why. I know what I want to try to achieve with coaching. I know that I want to try to impact as many female athletes as I possibly can. I want to help a program grow. So I think it's so easy to think about the job right away and the success or the person you are as a coach rather than think about everything behind it. So like, why am I doing this? How can I make an impact? And where's my passion? I think that's the number one thing to explore before you become a coach. Because if you jump right away into coaching without knowing your passion or knowing your why, yeah, you have to figure it out down the line because it's a tough job. But I think if you have the right intentions, you're gonna find your way through it. And then the number two rule I would give, which I have not figured out yet, so I would give it to every coach at the beginning now, would be you have to find a way to take at least minimum one day off a week. Minimum. That one I have not mastered yet, and I'm my biggest critic, and everyone criticizes me for it anyway. They're all right. But then being a massive hypocrite, I would tell anybody else who's becoming a coach. And if I could be their mentor, I would say you have to take one day off a week, because it's a never ending job.
Hmm. Yeah. All right. I think that's the perfect place to end. But Sid, I appreciate your time. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks, Allison. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much for listening. If you aren't already, I would highly recommend subscribing to the podcast so you can get updated once new episodes are dropped. If you're a fan of the show, go ahead and leave a review. It really helps spread the word to more athletes, parents, and coaches. Now, if you have any questions for myself or future guests, feedback, or you're curious on how we can work together to help you reach your basketball goals, let's have a conversation. Feel free to email me at l@hoopsthroughlife.com today to set that up. That's el@hoopsthroughlife.com. Thank you, and I look forward to hearing from you soon.